My name is Hudson. I joined the NSRI in 1981, which was the year that this station was formed. It's quite interesting that I was living up the hill, and in the Sentinel that week there was a request that people who wanted to join this new organization, the NSRI, should get in touch with Ken Brady. So I phoned him up and said, I'm interested, but do I have to be able to speak Afrikaans? A big laugh, and he said, no, you don't have to speak Afrikaans. So I said, I'm in. I was 50 years old at the time, so I had 13 years experience of flying in an Air Force. They made me a controller on one of the crews at once. I became an active crew member about 3 years later, because they became very short of crew on my particular crew, and the station commander asked me if I would go to sea. So I did, and I rose through the ranks, became a coxswain. I was invited to be the deputy station commander, I don't know, some years later, and I held that job, I know, for at least 10 years. I then became station SATCOM here for 4 years, and gave it up after that, and Peter Adamo took over. I then became a regional director, looking after stations down the coast from Mykonos through to Komiki, and I did that for quite a number of years. Meanwhile, the head of the NSRI, or the chairman I should say, asked me to join the awards committee. So I was on that committee for 10, 12 years, and eventually became chairman of that committee. One day I decided I'd become too ancient for anything else, and retired gracefully into the background. So very kindly the board made me a life governor, which means that I go to a board meeting, I can make as much noise as I like, but they can't chuck me off. When I joined the NSRI, it was run in very much a different manner to the highly organized and professional way that things are organized by head office today. This station was started in 1981. It was a committee, and in fact, interestingly, Brad Geezer was on that committee, and they decided they needed an NSRI station here, and so it was built, not this beautiful building we're in today, but a little tin shed in which our 8-meter, 2-inboard engine boat was kept. You may be interested to know why the station's called, or numbered, number 8. It's got absolutely nothing to do with being the 8th station built. The very first CEO of NSRI, Commander Holman, sat down and decided that he was going to number the stations in the future. So one was in the layup basin, 2 was Buckoven, because in fact it was the first active station, and so it went. 3 therefore was the other station envisaged for Cape Town, 4 became Mykonos, 5, 6, 7, all the way up the coast, up till 7, and 7 was East London. Yeah. He then had run out of big coastal areas which needed a boat, and so he thought, well, next one is Hout Bay, and so Hout Bay became Station-8, and that's where we got our A number of memorable things took place while I was on the station. Of course, the building of your beautiful base was one of them. In the old days, all the boats were afloat boats. No boat was ashore. We started to argue about that, and in fact, I did a little bit of statistics, and a rescue boat spends about 5% of its life on the water. A bit more if you're doing a lot of training, but 5. So it was agreed that Station-8 should be a base with a boat inside it. Ken Brady, the station commander, and myself, we both went over to England. He went to look at some RNLI stations and I went to look at others. And when we came back, we drew up a plan of what we thought the station should be. We then gave it to one of our crewmen, who is an architect, and he produced a beautiful set of drawings. The next question is, where the hell was the money going to come from to build the place? So we knew Murray and Roberts. They were doing a lot of work around Hout Bay at the time, and Ken Brady in particular knew somebody there. So we went, Ken and I went to see him, and he looked at the plans, and he said, "I'm not going to build that." "Oh, that's very disappointing." He said, "No, if you build a proper factory-like building without any frills, I'll build it for you and I won't charge you." And that's why we've got the building as we have. Face brick outside. That's partly because I worked in bricks at the time, and there was much less maintenance with face brick. And if you look at all the exterior windows, you will notice that they're all plastic, the frames. That was brand new in those days. Plastic, not wood. And again I said, I'm a lazy bugger. I don't have to re-varnish and I'd rather have plastic. We built this station in 1990, and when it was finished, we were going to have a formal opening with all the people we had to thank for the bits and pieces, and there were many of them. And then 2 days before the opening, I was at home and I got a call saying the station's on fire. So I rushed down, and our 8-meter boat was being kept inside at the time, and they were putting in fail-safe into the petrol tanks. But the stupid ass started to smoke with the petrol tanks open, and the whole thing caught fire. It's the only time for many years that I actually shed a tear. However, if you go downstairs and you look up, you'll see in the ceiling a spot which is not beautifully smooth, and that's where the fire occurred. There is another point about this base. The width of the floor in those days was largest unsupported concrete slab in South Africa. And it was designed by one of our crewmen, Anthony Sneath. One of the memorable rescues that we did was of Gulliver in 1986. It was remarkable for two or three matters. One was that we had a crewman on board who had said the day before to the station commander he'd had enough and he was going to retire. And Ken Brady said to him, well, look, just stay on until the end of this week and then off you go. And that night there was a call out. There was a very strong storm running, and the yacht, the Gulliver, ran ashore right underneath Slunkop Light. As you know, there's some very nasty rocks around there. Nevertheless, Gulliver went off with Peter Braham and his crew, and they wove their way in between the rocks, and they switched off Slunkop Light. It's the only time I've ever known a lighthouse light being put off during working hours. Anyway, they turned it off so that Peter, with his onboard illumination, could see what he was doing, and they got the 4 crew off. I can't remember how that was made up. I know one was a young daughter, and they got them out. So that was a remarkable effort. And another memorable rescue we were involved in was Pam Breen. She was a yacht which was being brought around from False Bay to Cape Town, and they had a very, what's the word I want, inexperienced skipper in charge in very bad weather, not very clever. Anyway, it called for help when it was somewhere off Komiki Way, south of Komiki, and we sent out our boat to look for it. But to cut a long story short, that whole rescue took about 18 hours. And we had to call Station 3. I was station commander at the time, and I called Station 3 around, and it took them an hour and a half to get here, and they were all seasick except the coxswain, and so they weren't much use for an hour or so until they'd recovered. Anyway, a couple of our people got high awards for that. They had to take Pam Breen in tow in the end. Oh, yes, a very interesting point. In those days, it was brand new, you know, electronic navigation was in its infancy, and we had a device on the desk in front of us which showed where the boat was going, and on its way back, our boat, which had been out for some time, I think it was the port motor, was running very hot. So the coxswain phoned me up and said, what do I do? So I said, well, can you make way with one motor? So he said, yes, I can. So I said, well, shut the other one down, which they did. And about 20 minutes later, he said, I'm not sure that was a good idea. So I said, well, for God's sakes, turn the other one on again. Doesn't matter if we burn it out, just... and it's the navigation aid that we had, when we printed it out, showed quite clearly that the moment he turned off the port motor, the boat was being driven ashore on Noordhoek Beach but we got away with it. There are a number of people I could talk about on the station who've all done a wonderful job, but I don't want to leave anybody out, so I will leave everybody out except Margie Benson. She must be mentioned. She was a real tower of strength on the station, the first woman we had here. She stood no nonsense at all. She drank like a fish to start with. In fact, it was quite interesting. That crew which did the Gulliver rescue was known after its training on a Saturday or a Sunday to go to a little known back door in the Chapman's Peak Hotel and have quite a party. I wasn't supposed to know that, because if I had, I would have had to stop it, but they just got on with it. And Margie, of course, looked after all the girls who joined us. I well remember her saying to one when she joined, "Now, you just leave the blokes alone. You're here to do a job, not to look for a husband." Yeah. So that's Margie all over. I'd just like to say a word to everybody who's on the station now about how very important your job is, and I do understand what a lot of training you have to do. But nowadays everything is so far advanced in all matters, electronic, mechanical generally. But the only thing that probably hasn't changed is how to tie a bowline. So the more you work, the more you will enjoy what you're doing. The scale of training that head office provides nowadays is quite remarkable and really very impressive. I think it measures up to any standard internationally. So keep at it. Some of you will become coxswains, and I wish you well in that task, because you will then have both man management and also decision-making situations which may take a lot out of you. But the service that you provide around the coast, you can see all the information that Craig Lambinon puts out is absolutely vital.